Captain Samuel Grant sat on his porch watching the sun set over the mountains of New Montana Colony. The gentle breeze carried the scent of pine trees. At 68 years old, his body showed the wear of many battles. Scars crisscrossed his hands, and his left knee ached when it rained. But his eyes remained sharp, taking in every detail of the landscape before him. He sipped his coffee and thought about his grandchildren, who would visit next week. Life was peaceful now. Sometimes he missed the old days, but mostly he was glad to be done with fighting. The quiet buzz of his communication device broke the silence. Samuel frowned. Nobody called on this channel anymore. It was his old military line, kept active out of habit rather than necessity. He answered with a gruff, "Grant here." The face of a young officer appeared, looking stressed. "Captain Grant, this is Lieutenant Kim from Alliance Command. Your service is required again, sir. Emergency Protocol 37 has been enacted." Samuel's coffee mug froze halfway to his mouth. Protocol 37. The recall of veteran soldiers. This hadn't happened in 30 years. "What's the situation?" he asked, already standing up, his old instincts kicking in. "The Zilari Dominion has attacked our outer colonies, sir. Ruthless and efficient. Our current forces are—" The young man hesitated. "They're not holding up well." "The Zilari? Never heard of them. They've been watching us for years, sir. Studying our tactics. They have superior technology and seem to know our standard protocols inside out." Samuel nodded slowly. "And now you need old soldiers, people who don't fight by the current rulebook." "Yes, sir. Transport will arrive at your location in 3 hours. You'll be briefed fully upon arrival at Centauri Base." The call ended. Samuel stood very still for a moment. Then he walked inside his cabin, opened his closet, and pulled out an old trunk from the back. The lock clicked open, revealing his old uniform, cleaned and pressed despite years of disuse. Next to it lay his service, medals in a small wooden box. He opened the box and looked at the worn photograph inside, his old squad from the Centauri campaign. Only 3 of them had made it back. Samuel packed quickly and efficiently. As he finished, his neighbor Bill walked over. "Going somewhere, Sam?" he asked, eyeing the military-grade duffel bag. "They're calling us back, Bill. Protocol 37. Bill's face paled. He was a veteran too, though he had served in logistics rather than combat. "Must be bad." "Sounds like it." "The Zilari. Ever heard of them?" Bill shook his head. "New players, then. Be careful out there, Sam." Samuel nodded. They shook hands, and Bill left without another word. Some things didn't need saying between old soldiers. The transport arrived exactly on time. As Samuel approached, he saw he wasn't the only passenger. A woman with steel-gray hair tied back in a tight bun sat inside, her posture military straight despite her age. "Joyce Harrington," she said, as Samuel sat across from her. "Demolition specialist. Samuel Grant, ground tactics." They shook hands. Her grip was firm, her hands calloused from years of work. "Been a while since I've blown anything up on purpose," Joyce said with a slight smile. 72 years old and back in uniform. My grandkids thought I was joking. 2 more transports arrived at the small landing pad. A tall black man with a neatly trimmed white beard stepped out of one, moving with the careful precision of someone who had injured his back years ago, but refused to show weakness. "Alan Blackwood," he introduced himself. "Ground Tactics Command, just like you, Grant. I read your file years ago. Impressive work during the Orion conflicts." From the other transport came a short Hispanic woman with laugh lines around her eyes. She moved with surprising energy for someone her age. Maria Cortez, fighter pilot. And before you ask, yes, I can still fly circles around pilots half my age. The 4 veterans sized each other up with the quick efficiency of people used to evaluating potential allies in dangerous situations. They found no obvious weaknesses, only the expected marks of age. The transport lifted off, heading for orbit. Through the viewport, Samuel watched his small cabin disappear below the clouds. He wondered if he would ever see it again. "So," Alan said after they reached cruising altitude, "what do we know about these Zilari?" Not much, Samuel replied. Apparently they've been studying us for years. Studying and misunderstanding, Joyce added. Must have if they're calling us back. Maria nodded. Young soldiers today, they're good kids, well-trained, but they rely on their tech, their simulations, everything by the book. And we wrote. Different books, Alan said with a grim smile. The transport docked with a larger ship in orbit which immediately jumped to faster-than-light travel. 6 hours later they arrived at Centauri Base, once the front line of human expansion and now a well-established military hub. As they disembarked, Samuel noticed dozens of other transports arriving, each carrying older men and women in uniforms that weren't quite current standard issue. The base buzzed with activity, a mix of confused young officers and determined older veterans. They were led to a large briefing room. On the way, Samuel observed the base with a tactical eye. Too many personnel running around without clear purpose. Signs of panic poorly contained beneath military discipline. In the briefing room, a young woman waited for them. Her uniform identified her as General Lydia Weber. She looked tired but stood straight as the veterans filed in. Thank you all for coming, she began once everyone was seated. I know many of you thought your fighting days were over. I apologize for disrupting your retirement, but the situation is dire. She activated a holographic display showing a star map. Several planets were marked in red. The Zalari Dominion attacked without warning 3 weeks ago. They've taken these colonies already. She pointed to the red markers. Their forces move with precision and overwhelming force. Samuel studied the pattern of attacks. They're isolating the rim worlds before pushing inward. Classic encirclement. Strategy, General Weber nodded. Yes, and they execute it perfectly. Their troops deploy in mathematical formations our tactical computers recognize as optimal. Their strategies seem designed specifically to counter our standard responses. Joyce frowned. And the young soldiers don't know what to do when the enemy knows the playbook. Exactly, Weber confirmed. Our forces are brave, well-equipped, but they've never had to improvise their way out of a complete disaster, Alan finished for her. Never had to use a broken weapon to win a fight. Never had to ignore the rulebook because the situation doesn't fit any scenario they've trained for. General Weber looked at each veteran in turn. That's why you're here. The Zalari understand our modern military doctrine, but they've never faced humans who fought in the early expansion wars. Your experience, your unconventional thinking, your creativity in combat situations is what we need now. Maria leaned forward. What about air support? I'll need to see your fighters. Of course, but first, there's someone else you should meet. The door opened and an elderly man entered. Samuel immediately stood straighter. Despite the years, he recognized the commanding presence of Admiral John Shepard, hero of the first expansion. War and arguably the greatest military mind humanity had produced. The Admiral, now well into his 80s, walked slowly but steadily to the front of the room. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of decades of command. Ladies and gentlemen, I never thought I'd see another war. I was wrong. The Zalari believe they understand human warfare. They've studied our recent conflicts, analyzed our tactics, prepared counters for everything they've seen. He paused, looking around the room at the gathered veterans. What they haven't seen is how humans fought when we were the underdogs, when we were outnumbered, outgunned, and still crawled our way to victory. They haven't seen the dirty, desperate kind of fighting that doesn't show up in training simulations. Admiral Shepard smiled, a predator's smile that didn't reach his eyes. It's time to teach them what they've missed. General Lydia Weber stood at the head of the conference table, surrounded by the veterans who had answered the recall. She had prepared detailed presentations on Zalari battle tactics, weapons capabilities, and defensive systems. 3 hours into the briefing, she realized the old soldiers were approaching the problem differently than she expected. Samuel Grant had moved from his seat to stand by the holographic display. He manipulated the image, zooming in on Zalari troop formations during their attack on Harper's World colony. Look here, he said, pointing to the precise geometric pattern of the alien forces. Too perfect, too predictable. Joyce Harrington nodded. They're relying on mathematical optimization, Probably run everything through combat computers before making a move. Exactly, Samuel agreed. Which means they can't adapt quickly to the unexpected. General Weber frowned. Their tactical AI is advanced. It processes battlefield changes faster than human commanders can. Processing isn't understanding, Alan Blackwood said, his deep voice calm but firm. An AI sees patterns. It doesn't see opportunity in chaos. Maria Cortez had been quiet, studying the schematics of modern alliance fighters. She looked up from her tablet. These ships are too safe. Too many automatic overrides. Too many systems designed to prevent pilot error. Those systems save lives, General Weber said defensively. They prevent unnecessary risks. Maria's weathered face broke into a slight smile. In war, sometimes the necessary risks look unnecessary until after they work. The briefing room fell silent. General Weber looked around at the veterans, these relics from an earlier age of warfare who spoke about combat with a casualness that bordered on irreverence. So different from the precise, technology-dependent approach modern soldiers took. "What would you suggest?" she finally asked. Samuel exchanged glances with the other veterans. "First, we need to see what we're working with. The troops, the ships, the weapons. Then we'll know what changes to make." The next day, General Weber watched from an observation deck as Samuel and Alan inspected the ground forces. The younger soldiers stood nervously at attention as the two old men walked through their ranks asking unexpected questions. "When was the last time you had to field strip your weapon in complete darkness?" Samuel asked one young corporal. "Sir, we have night vision equipment standard issue," the soldier replied. "And when that fails?" Samuel pressed. We can call for equipment repair drones." Samuel and Alan exchanged looks. "And when those aren't available?" The young soldier had no answer. In the hangar bay, Maria Cortez climbed into the cockpit of a modern fighter, ignoring the protests of the maintenance chief that civilians weren't allowed in the aircraft. She ran her hands over the controls, her face showing disappointment. "Too many safeguards," she said when she emerged. "A good pilot needs to feel the ship, push it past what the designers thought possible." In the weapons testing range, Joyce Harrington examined the latest explosive devices with professional interest. When the range officer demonstrated their precision targeting capabilities, Joyce shook her head. "Sometimes you don't want precision," she said. "Sometimes you want chaos, confusion. These are too clean." By evening, the four veterans gathered in General Weber's office to present their findings. The general looked exhausted, but she listened carefully. "Your soldiers are well trained," Samuel began diplomatically, "but they've been trained for a different kind of war than the one they're facing. They expect battle to follow protocols," Alan added. "They expect enemies to behave according to predicted patterns." "And your pilots," Maria said. "They fly by the numbers. They don't improvise." Joyce nodded her agreement. "Your weapons are powerful, but designed for fighting a conventional enemy. The Zilari have studied these weapons, know their capabilities, and have adapted to them." General Weber took a deep breath. "What do you propose?" "Give us 2 weeks with your troops," Samuel said. "We'll teach them the old ways, not to replace their training, but to supplement it. And I need authority to modify some of the fighters," Maria added. "Nothing unsafe, but the pilots need more direct control." "I want access to the fabrication labs," Joyce said. "Some of my old explosive recipes aren't in the database anymore. For good reason, probably, but they'll surprise the Zilari." General Weber looked uncertain. "The chain of command will remain intact," Alan assured her. "We're not taking over, General. We're adding to what you already have." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. 2 weeks. That's all we have before we need to launch a counteroffensive to retake New Harmony Colony. The next 2 weeks transformed Centauri Base. The veterans worked tirelessly, each focusing on their area of expertise. Samuel and Alan took over a training field and ran the younger soldiers through scenarios that seemed chaotic and disorganized. At first, they created situations where standard equipment failed, where communication was cut off, where the enemy did something completely unexpected. At first, The young soldiers struggled, looking for regulation solutions to non-regulation problems. But gradually they began to adapt, to think beyond their training. In the hangars, Maria worked closely with the pilots and maintenance crews. She disabled certain safety overrides, modified control systems, and taught the pilots maneuvers that weren't in any current flight manual. Maneuvers that stressed the ships to their limits but could provide a crucial edge in combat. If the computer says it's impossible, she told them, that just means the computer lacks imagination. Joyce took over a section of the weapons lab, working with a small team of fascinated engineers. They created devices that weren't elegant or precise, but would create confusion on the battlefield. Smoke generators that would blind Storie sensors, electromagnetic pulses that would temporarily disrupt their communications, and explosives with unpredictable blast patterns. General Weber watched all this with growing interest. On the 10th day, she found Samuel in the mess hall sitting alone with a cup of coffee. "Do you think this will be enough?" she asked, sitting across from him. Samuel considered the question carefully. "It's a start. The real test will come in battle." "Why? Do you think the Storie don't understand our older fighting styles? Surely they studied our history." "Studying history isn't the same as understanding it," Samuel replied. "They've probably seen our old battles, analyzed our tactics, but they're missing context." He sipped his coffee before continuing. "The early years of space combat, we were making it up as we went, fighting with inferior technology, limited resources. We learned to be unpredictable because it was often our only advantage." General Weber nodded slowly. "And the Storie? From what I've seen, they evolved in a highly structured society. They value order, predictability, optimization. The idea of deliberately introducing chaos as a tactic, it might be literally unthinkable to them. On the 14th day, they received word that the Storie were advancing toward New Harmony Colony. Admiral Shepard called the veterans to the command center. "It's time," he said, his aged face solemn. "The fleet leaves in 6 hours. Are your preparations complete?" The 4 veterans exchanged glances. A lifetime of combat experience passing between them in that silent communication. "As complete as they can be," Samuel answered. "Now we find out if old dogs still remember their old tricks." Admiral Shepard smiled. "I have faith in you all. The Storie think they understand human warfare. It's time they learned about the parts of our history they've missed." As they left the command center, Joyce voiced what they were all thinking. "Just like old times, isn't it?" Samuel nodded, feeling the familiar pre-battle tension he hadn't experienced in decades. "Let's hope we're not too old for one more dance." The Alliance fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Harmony system. Samuel Grant stood on the bridge of the command ship, looking at the tactical display. The Storie forces had established orbital positions around New Harmony, their ships arranged in a perfect defensive pattern. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Samuel said to General Weber, who stood beside him. "Mathematically perfect coverage, no gaps, no weak points." "How do we break through that?" she asked. Samuel smiled. "We don't try to break through. We make them break their own formation." The plan was unorthodox. While the main fleet maintained position at a safe distance, Maria Cortez would lead a small squadron of fighters modified according to her specifications. They wouldn't attack directly but would fly erratic patterns at the edge of Storie sensor range. "Ready to fly?" Samuel asked Maria before she headed to the launch bay. The old pilot grinned. "Been ready since they called us back. My pilots are nervous, though." "They'll follow your lead," Maria nodded. "That's what worries them." In the launch bay, 12 pilots waited beside their fighters. Most were young, under 30, with 1 or 2 veterans in their 40s. They watched with a mixture of respect and concern as Maria approached. "Remember what we practiced," she told them. "Forget the standard attack patterns. Fly like your navigation computer is broken. Be unpredictable. The Storie expect us to follow optimal approach vectors. We're going to fly the worst possible routes." A young pilot raised his hand. "Ma'am, won't that make us easier targets?" "Only if they can predict where you'll be," Maria replied. "Their targeting systems are designed to track logical flight paths. We're going to be illogical. The squadron launched, accelerating toward the Zolari picket line. On the command ship, Samuel and the others watched the tactical display. "Now for our part," Samuel said. He turned to Joyce. "Are your special packages ready?" Joyce patted a case beside her. "Ready and very non-regulation." She grinned. "These haven't been used since the Orion border conflicts." Samuel, Joyce, Alan, and 200 veteran soldiers boarded transport ships. Their mission was to land on New Harmony while the Zolari were distracted by Maria's air show. In space, Maria's squadron began their approach. At first, they maintained standard formation, allowing the Zolari sensors to track them easily. Then, at Maria's command, they scattered in 12 different directions, each pilot following a random zigzagging path. On the Zolari command ship, confusion spread. Their tactical computers struggled to establish tracking solutions on fighters that weren't following any recognizable pattern. The fighters would accelerate, then cut engines, spin in place, accelerate again in a new direction, all while staying just out of effective weapons range. "They are malfunctioning," one Zolari officer suggested to the commander. "No," the commander replied, his compound eyes narrowing. "This is deliberate, a distraction." But from what? While the Zolari fleet adjusted positions to deal with the erratic fighter squadron, splitting their perfect formation to cover more approach vectors, the transport ships carrying Samuel and the ground forces slipped through a temporary gap in their sensor coverage. "Atmospheric entry in 30 seconds, the pilot announced. "Brace for turbulence." The entry was rough, the transport ships taking some damage from atmospheric friction because they were coming in at an unusual angle to avoid detection. But they landed safely in a forested area 20 miles from the main Zolari ground base. "Move out," Samuel ordered as the veterans disembarked. Despite their age, they moved with purpose and discipline through the forest. Each carried weapons and equipment chosen for reliability, rather than technological sophistication. Alan led a team that circled wide to approach the Zolari base from the north. Samuel took the direct approach from the east, while Joyce and her demolition specialist headed for the power generation facilities to the south. The Zolari had established their main base in what had been the colony's central plaza. Their troops moved in precise formations, patrolling the perimeter in predictable patterns. They had set up shield generators and automated defense turrets at mathematically optimal intervals. Samuel observed them through binoculars. "Just as we thought, they're creatures of pattern and order." He gave the signal to proceed with the plan. Joyce's team moved first, placing their special devices at key points around the Zolari power generators. These weren't standard explosives but devices designed to create electromagnetic interference and sensory overload, rather than physical damage. "Ready on your command." Joyce's voice came through the comm unit. Samuel waited until Alan confirmed. His team was in position. "Remember, we're not trying to win in one big attack. We want to confuse them, make them react to us instead of following their plan. Execute." Joyce triggered her devices. They didn't explode so much as pulse, sending waves of electromagnetic interference that disrupted Zolari communications and sensor systems. At the same time, they released clouds of smoke containing particles specifically designed to interfere with Zolari visual spectrum. The effect was immediate. The orderly Zolari patrols broke formation as they lost contact with their command center. Their movements became hesitant. Samuel gave the order to attack. The veteran soldiers emerged from cover, moving in small independent groups rather than a coordinated force. Each team had been given objectives but allowed to determine their own method of achieving them. The Zolari were unprepared for this chaotic approach. Their defensive systems were designed to detect and target organized assaults. The scattered, seemingly random movements of the human veterans confused their tactical computers. In orbit, Maria's fighter squadron had drawn a significant portion of the Zolari fleet out of position. Now they switched from evasion to attack, targeting specific systems on the Zolari ships. Not to destroy them, but to disable their communications and coordination abilities. On the ground, Alan's team captured a Zolari defensive position with minimal resistance. The aliens had retreated to regroup rather than adapt to the unexpected attack pattern, Samuel led his team toward the colony's command center, where the Zellari had established their headquarters. They encountered stiff resistance but used the urban environment to their advantage, moving through buildings and underground passages that the Zellari had deemed tactically insignificant in their calculations. Joyce's team, having disabled the power generators, moved to support Samuel. They used their remaining devices to create more confusion, filling the air with smoke and electromagnetic interference. 4 hours after landing, the veterans had secured the colony's central plaza. The Zellari forces had retreated in disarray, falling back to secondary positions but unable to establish a coordinated defense. Samuel found Joyce sitting on a fallen piece of masonry, catching her breath. "Just like the old days," he said. She laughed. "Except in the old days, my knees didn't hurt this much afterward." Alan joined them, his uniform torn but otherwise unharmed. "Casualty report. We have 12 wounded, none critical. No fatalities." Samuel nodded. "And the Zellari?" "Hard to tell. They've retreated to the eastern ridge. Seems they're trying to re-establish communication with their fleet." Samuel activated his comm unit. "Maria, status." Maria's voice came through the sound of her fighters' engines in the background. 6 Zellari ships disabled. The rest have pulled. Back to regroup. "They seem confused, Sam. Their formations are breaking down." Samuel smiled. "Good. General Weber, are you receiving this?" The general's voice was clear. "We are, Captain Grant. Impressive work. Our main forces are moving in now to secure your gains." As the sun set over New Harmony Colony, the veterans gathered in what had been the colony's town hall. The younger, Alliance soldiers who had begun landing to secure the area looked at them with newfound respect. "This is just the beginning," Samuel told his fellow veterans. "The Zellari will adapt. They'll study what happened here and try to calculate a response." "Let them try," Joyce said with a grin. "Some things can't be calculated." News of the victory at New Harmony spread quickly across human space. The story of how veteran soldiers had defeated a technologically superior enemy captured the imagination of civilians and military personnel alike. Within days, thousands more retired soldiers volunteered to return to service. On New Harmony, Samuel Grant walked through the colony's main street, now bustling with Alliance military personnel and returning civilians. Buildings showed damage from the battle, but repair crews worked steadily to restore the colony. "Captain Grant." A group of young soldiers called out to him. They stood straighter as he approached. "Sir, is it true you're starting a training program?" Samuel nodded. "That's right. Begins tomorrow at 600. Spread the word." After the success at New Harmony, General Weber had approved Samuel's request to establish a training camp for regular troops. The goal was to teach them the unconventional tactics that had proven so effective against the Zellari. "You think they can learn?" Alan asked as he joined Samuel. "These kids have been trained very differently than we were." "They're adaptable," Samuel replied. "That's always been humanity's strength." In the colony's repurposed community center, Joyce Harrington conducted her own special training sessions. A group of engineers and explosives technicians watched in fascination as she demonstrated how to create devices using limited resources. "Standard issue explosives are predictable," she explained. "The Zellari have calculated their blast radius, their timing, everything. But this..." She held up a small device cobbled together from seemingly random parts. "This they haven't seen before." Maria Cortez had taken over the colony's small spaceport. She stood surrounded by pilots, both young and a few older ones who had answered the recall. On screens around them played footage from the battle. "See this maneuver?" She pointed to a fighter executing a tight spin followed by an immediate change of direction. "The computer says it's impossible at that speed. The manual says it puts too much stress on the ship's frame. Both are wrong." The pilots watched with a mixture of awe and concern. "You're not going to break your ships," Maria assured them. "You're going to make them dance." At Alliance headquarters, General Weber met with Admiral Shepard and other high-ranking officers. Intelligence reports from across the front lines painted a surprising picture. "The Zellari are hesitating," General Weber reported. "They've slowed their advance on multiple fronts. Our analysts believe they're reassessing their strategy after New Harmony. Admiral Shepard nodded. They're trying to understand what happened, trying to calculate a response to something that defies their understanding of human tactics. We've intercepted some of their communications, another officer added. They refer to our veterans as unpredictable variables and tactical anomalies. They seem genuinely confused by fighters that don't follow optimal flight paths and ground, forces that don't move in standard formations. Back on New Harmony, Samuel's training program was underway. He stood before 200 young soldiers in an open field outside the colony. "Forget everything you know about formation fighting," he told them. "Today we're going to learn how to be unpredictable." He divided them into small groups and set them against each other in combat simulations where the rules kept changing. One moment they had working communications, the next they didn't. Weapons would suddenly malfunction, requiring improvised solutions. Many struggled at first, looking for protocol-based answers to problems that had none, but gradually, they began to adapt, to think independently rather than rely on their training. Meanwhile, Joyce worked with a team to install special defenses around the colony. Rather than the standard shield generators and automated turrets that the Zolari had come to expect, they created systems designed to confuse and misdirect. "The Zolari think in patterns," she explained to her team. "We need to break those patterns, create chaos where they expect order." In orbit, Maria drilled her pilots relentlessly. They practiced maneuvers that violated every principle of their formal training, flying in ways that made their navigation computers flash warning signals constantly. "The computer is a tool, not a pilot," she reminded them. "Trust your instincts." A week after the battle, long-range sensors detected Zolari scouts at the edge of the system. They didn't approach closely, merely observed from a distance. "They're studying us," Samuel told General Weber during a secure communication, "trying to understand what we did here." "Let them look," the general replied. "Meanwhile, we are implementing your training methods across the fleet. Every colony is establishing veteran advisory groups. Your success has changed our entire approach." That evening, Samuel, Joyce, Alan, and Maria met in what had become their unofficial headquarters, a small room in the colony's administration building. A tactical display showed the current situation across human space. The Zolari advance had slowed significantly since New Harmony. "They're adapting," Alan noted. "They're cautious now." Joyce nodded. "Which means our advantage of surprise won't last forever." "But we have something else now," Maria said. "The younger soldiers are learning. Did you see Peters today? Last week, he couldn't fly without the navigation computer. Today he did that corkscrew maneuver perfectly." Samuel studied the display. "The Zolari will come back, and they'll come with a new plan. But they're still thinking like the Zolari, seeking the perfect solution, the optimal strategy. And we'll keep changing the game," Joyce finished. The next morning, a communication came through from a colony on the outer rim. The Zolari had attacked but retreated when faced with unexpected resistance. Similar reports began coming in from other locations. Admiral Shepard called a meeting of all veteran officers. His aged face looked energized as he addressed them. "The Zolari are testing our new tactics, probing for weaknesses," he explained. "But there's something else. We've intercepted more of their communications." He activated a display showing translated Zolari text. "Their ground troops have begun performing rituals before engaging with our forces, particularly when veterans are present. Our xenolinguists believe these are religious in nature." "They're praying?" Joyce asked incredulously. "Something equivalent to it," the Admiral confirmed. "It seems the unpredictability of our veterans frightens them on a fundamental level. Their society values order and pattern. What you represent, experience, improvisation, chaos as a tactic, violates everything they understand about warfare." Samuel thought about this. Fear can be a powerful weapon. "Indeed," the Admiral agreed. "And right now, when old human soldiers step onto the battlefield, the enemy begins to pray. That's an advantage I intend to use." As the meeting concluded, Samuel looked out a window at the young soldiers training in the field beyond. They moved with growing confidence, adapting quickly to the chaotic scenarios their veteran instructors created. They learn fast, Alan commented, joining him at the window. Samuel nodded. They have to. The Zilari will adapt too. The real test is still ahead. As if to confirm his words, an alarm sounded. The colony's long-range sensors had detected a large Zilari fleet entering the system. So it begins again, Samuel said, straightening his uniform. Let's see what they've learned and what they haven't. The Zilari fleet approaching New Harmony was 3 times larger than the force they had sent before. From the command center, Samuel Grant watched the tactical display with Admiral Shepard and General Weber. They're not taking any chances this time, Samuel observed. Admiral Shepard nodded. This isn't just another attack. This is their response to what happened here. They've analyzed, calculated, and believe they've found the solution to our veterans. The Zilari ships moved in a new formation, less rigid than before but still following clear patterns. They had adapted, but they were still Zilari, still bound by their nature to seek order and optimization. Proxima Station is the real target, General Weber said, pointing to a strategic facility several systems away. This is just a feint to draw our forces. Samuel studied the display. No, they want New Harmony back. This has become symbolic for them. Their perfect system was broken here. They need to prove it was a fluke, an anomaly. Admiral Shepard agreed. Captain Grant is right. The Zilari need to restore order to their universe. We disrupted their understanding of warfare. Now they need to correct that. The Admiral turned to Samuel. This is the decisive moment. If we defeat them again, using the same unconventional tactics, it will shatter their confidence. Samuel looked around the command center at the mix of young officers and recalled veterans working side by side. We're ready. The plan they developed wasn't really a plan in the traditional sense. It was more a set of guidelines, a framework that allowed for maximum flexibility and individual initiative. The veterans would lead small independent units with the freedom to adapt to changing situations without waiting for orders. In the fighter bay, Maria Cortez briefed her pilots. Remember, don't fall into patterns. The moment you start flying predictably, they'll have you. Keep changing, keep them guessing. Joyce Harrington and her team had prepared special surprises throughout the colony and its surrounding area. These aren't just explosives, she told the defense coordinators. They're chaos generators. Use them to disrupt their formations, not just to cause damage. Alan Blackwood worked with the ground defense forces. The Zilari expect us to protect certain strategic points, so we won't. We'll defend places they consider irrelevant while leaving obvious targets lightly guarded as bait. The Zilari fleet entered orbit and launched their first attack wave. As expected, they targeted the colony's main defense installations with overwhelming force. But they found minimal resistance there. The bulk of the human forces were elsewhere, hiding in locations the Zilari tactical computers had classified as militarily insignificant. In space, Maria's fighters executed their chaotic dance, never maintaining formation, never following predictable attack vectors. The Zilari ships fired repeatedly but hit mostly empty space where their computers predicted the humans should be. On the ground, the Zilari troops landed in precise formations, ready to deal with the unorthodox tactics they had encountered before. But the humans had changed their approach again. Where before they had attacked in small independent groups, now they sometimes massed forces for brief, intense assaults before scattering again. From his position near the colony center, Samuel directed his unit to fall back, deliberately leaving open a path to what appeared to be a command post. The Zilari forces moved forward cautiously, suspicious of the apparent opportunity. Now, Joyce, Samuel said into his comm unit when the Zilari reached the right position. Joyce activated her special devices. Instead of explosions, they created a disorienting combination of electromagnetic pulses, smoke, and sound at frequencies particularly disturbing to Zilari sensory organs. The Zilari troops faltered, their formation breaking apart as individual soldiers struggled to cope with the sensory assault. Samuel's unit circled around and attacked from 3 directions simultaneously. forcing the Zalari into a disorganized retreat. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. The Zalari had prepared for the tactics used in the previous battle, but the humans had already adapted, already changed their approach. The veterans led by example, showing the younger soldiers how to think independently, how to see opportunities in chaos. In orbit, Maria's squadron had drawn a portion of the Zalari fleet into a debris field from the previous battle. The Zalari, ships, their tactical computers calculating safe passage through the debris, followed predictable paths. The human fighters, flying manually with their safety systems disengaged, used the debris as cover for ambush attacks. 6 hours into the battle, the tide had clearly turned. The Zalari ground forces had fragmented into isolated groups, unable to maintain cohesion in the face of constantly changing human tactics. Their ships in orbit began to withdraw, pulling back to safer distances. Samuel met with Joyce and Alan at a forward command post. All three showed signs of the hard fighting, dirt, minor injuries, exhaustion, but also satisfaction. They're retreating, Alan confirmed, checking the latest reports. Not just here, but across 3 sectors. They're pulling back everywhere. Joyce looked surprised. Complete withdrawal? That's not just a tactical retreat. Samuel nodded. They're reassessing their entire strategy. They came here confident they had solved the puzzle of human veterans. Now they know they haven't. A communication came through from Admiral Shepard. His aged face appeared on the screen, looking tired but triumphant. We've intercepted and translated Zalari communications from their high command. You'll want to hear this. The message played, translated into English by the ship's computer. Human tactical variations exceed calculated parameters. Elderly human combatants display pattern-breaking abilities beyond predictive modeling. Recommend full withdrawal and strategic reassessment. Classify all human veterans as extreme threat level. Joyce laughed. They still don't get it, do they? They're still trying to calculate and classify. That's their nature, Samuel said. They need patterns, predictability, the idea that old soldiers don't fight by the book, that we make it up as we go based on decades of experience. It violates everything they understand about warfare. 2 days later, with the Zalari fleet long gone and the colony secure, Samuel stood with Maria, Joyce, and Alan watching the sunset from a hillside overlooking New Harmony. The colony's lights were coming on as darkness fell, signs of life returning to normal. What do you think they'll do now? Maria asked. Keep trying to understand us, Samuel replied. Keep looking for patterns, for the perfect counter-strategy. And, when they don't find one, asked Alan. Joyce smiled. Maybe they'll learn that some things can't be calculated, that experience and adaptability sometimes trump technology and perfect formations. Samuel looked at his fellow veterans, these old warriors who had answered the call one more time. The younger soldiers are learning fast. They'll be ready next time, with or without us. Think we'll be needed again? Maria asked. Hard to say, Samuel replied. But I think the Zalari will remember for a long time what happened when old human soldiers stepped onto the battlefield. Later that night, a young lieutenant approached Samuel as he sat alone, looking at the stars. Sir, I wanted to thank you. We've learned more in these weeks than in years of formal training. Samuel nodded. Just remember the most important lesson, which is that the book is just a starting point. Real battles are won by soldiers who can think beyond their training, who can adapt when everything goes wrong. The lieutenant saluted and left. Samuel remained, thinking about the home he'd left behind and wondering if he would return to it now that the immediate crisis had passed. Part of him missed the quiet of retirement, but another part had awakened during these weeks of action, the old soldier who still had something to contribute. In the distance, he could see new recruits practicing the unconventional tactics the veterans had taught them. The future of human defense would be different now, a blend of modern technology and old-school unpredictability. Samuel smiled to himself. Some lessons could only be taught by those who had lived them. And as long as there were enemies who thought war could be reduced to calculations and patterns, there would be a place for old soldiers who knew better.